Hi, how you going? Today we're talking about the topic of God and planning and what he plans and what he doesn't. First, we're going to go to a couple of scriptures which show that God does not know everything that is going to happen in the future. Now, that's a big kick in the face to some people, and they'll just turn off right now and go, oh no, surely God knows everything. But I want to prove that he doesn't know everything. And the reason why he doesn't know everything is that he's given us free will. When you give somebody genuine free will, that person's choice will determine what's going to happen next for that person. It doesn't mean that it's outside of God's control, that God can still control it and turn it around for good or do whatever he wants to do in that situation. But he's allowed for free choices, and I want to just prove that. It says here, "Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart." So the first part of this verse says that the Lord saw the wickedness of man. So he sees it, and he was grieved by it. In his heart he said, "I wished I had not created man." He said that he wished he had not created man on the earth. It goes on to say, "So the Lord said, I'll destroy man whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things of the air, for I'm sorry that I've made them." So God was saying, look, I'm sorry I did this. That he didn't plan these wicked actions that people were taking. It's just that people were turning out to be wicked, and so God was sorry that he had actually created man. Now, he wanted free will. He wanted people to be able to make free choices and to freely follow him. But it turned out that mankind was always turning against God's will and not going God's way. Now, another verse which shows this as well is Saul. It says here, "And Samuel said to Saul, You've done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. And Samuel went to see Saul no more to the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel." So again, here we see regret based upon a man's choices. That he said, and this is the interesting point here, is he said, "For the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever." That's the same promise that he made to David, "I'll establish your kingdom over Israel forever." So he basically, the Lord would have done exactly what he did for David, for Saul, but Saul, because of his free will, chose to do something that displeased God, and so God changed that plan. So that's what we're talking about today, is the fact that God changes his future plans based upon the actions that we take. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't redirect the plans back around to what he wants to have happen. There are long-term plans which God has, like the Israelites were in bondage for 800 years and then were set free at the time of Moses. Now, that was something which he said was going to happen in 800 years' time. There's a lot of generations between that point. But God can still direct those generations around to do what he wants during those time frames of things which he has said. So, the cross was always going to happen. That's something that he could easily put into a time frame. But it doesn't mean that he had every little detail worked out before creation. Now, I do believe that God did plan things before creation, that he planned out all the things that he wanted to have happen, and that those things would come to pass. Now we see also, where do we see this? In the life of David, David said in the Psalms, he said, Your eyes saw my unformed substance in your book. All my days were recorded, even those which were purposed before they'd come into being. How dear are your thoughts towards me, O God. How great is the number of them. If I made the number of them, they'll be more than the grains of the sand. When I'm awake, I'm still with you." So David's saying that God has got a good plan worked out for him before he was even born. Now, that doesn't mean that every single day of David's is going to be what God wanted, because we find out that David sinned, and we know that God is not responsible for sin, that he says he doesn't tempt any man to sin. So God didn't want David's sin, but David sinned, and when he did, the Lord brought to pass a new plan for David, or a corrective plan, where it said, it says here, "I also would have given you much more. Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. You've taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me." So the Lord put into put a pathway or a plan into place after David sinned, because we know that God does not cause sin. God does not make David sin. So the fact is, this plan came to pass after David sinned. The same thing with Saul. God didn't cause Saul to sin. Saul sinned, and so the pathway changed. It went from being King Saul to being King David, who was given the chance to be that line through whom which Christ would come. And he ended up being that line. Now, there's other places in the Bible where people like Jeremiah, let's see if we can find it here. I've got it here somewhere. Jeremiah says, "Before you were formed in the body of your mother, I had knowledge of you. Before your birth, I made you holy, and I've given you the work of being a prophet for the nations." So God had a plan for Jeremiah that he would be a prophet. But what we see of Jeremiah is that even later on in his life, he nearly lost that calling. Now it says, the Lord was corrected Jeremiah because he was complaining. He said, "Therefore thus saith the Lord, if you return, then I'll bring you back. You shall stand before me. If you take the precious from the vial, you shall be as my mouth. Let them return to you, but you must not return to them." So the Lord was saying, I'll bring you back. I'll let you be my mouthpiece if you do these certain things. So even though God can have a plan, and maybe someone's destined to be a pastor, or maybe someone's going to be a pastor in their lifetime because that's what God has ordained, but yet that person can still end up in sin. You think about how many ministries there have been that have started out well and then ended up in sin and crashed. It's not that. What am I trying to suggest? What I'm trying to suggest is that God has given man free will. That we have choices to make, and our choices will determine our outcome, whether good or evil. God has a plan. He's got a book full of good plans for us. But if we act evilly, it can be turned around for a negative plan, and these plans can impact generations. It says in Deuteronomy that God shows kindness to tens of thousands of generations, or 1,000 generations of people who obey him, and he shows displeasure to 3 or 4 generations or something like that. So what we do in this life will have an impact upon our children, upon the people after us, and so we have to be making wise choices and good choices.